Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Richard Fowler, Jillian Turner, and Kennedy. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Stunning new developments in the case of Harvey Weinstein as more victims come forward. Today, Hollywood A-listers Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie said they have been sexually assaulted by the disgraced Hollywood mogul. All this comes as disturbing new audio is released of the studio boss caught in a sting operation by police and an Italian actress.
You must come here now.
No.
Please.
No, I don't want to.
I'm not doing anything with you. Now you're embarrassing me.
I'm sorry, I cannot. No, yesterday was a kind of aggressive for me. I need to know a person to be touched.
I won't do a thing.
Jonathan Hunt joins us with the latest. Jonathan.
Jesse, the allegations just keep coming. Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie both telling the New York Times Harvey Weinstein sexually harassed them when they were young and starting out in Hollywood. The New Yorker magazine separately reporting allegations of rape. And for the first time, we're hearing that audio of what the New Yorker claims is Harvey Weinstein pressuring a young actress to join him in his hotel room as she complains about being groped. Here's more of that.
I'm feeling very uncomfortable right now.
Please come in now, and 1 minute, and if you want to leave, when the guy comes with my jacket, you can go.
Yesterday you touched my wrist.
Oh, please, I'm sorry, just come on, I'm used to that. Come on.
Are you used to that?
Yes, come in.
Now, we should point out that tape was part of a 2015 police sting operation in New York, and the Manhattan DA's office ultimately declined to pursue charges in the case. The DA's office, in fact, has just put out a statement in the last few minutes on Twitter saying that that audio, quote, was insufficient to prove a crime under New York law. Meantime, the chorus of condemnation of Weinstein is getting louder. Nicole Kidman and George Clooney among the latest to speak out, and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who once considered the movie mogul a political supporter, issued a statement a couple of hours ago saying, quote, "I was shocked and appalled by the revelations about Harvey Weinstein. The behavior described by women coming forward cannot be tolerated. Their courage and the support of others is critical in helping to stop this kind of behavior." Now, Jesse, interesting to note that like the Clintons, the Obamas were also close to Harvey Weinstein. We have not yet heard from President or Mrs. Obama, who once described Harvey Weinstein as a, quote, wonderful human being. That was at the White House in 2013, Jesse.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, Kimberly, when you hear the audio tape of Weinstein, just disgusting. What do you think about that?
Well, I can imagine the Manhattan DA's office, is very frustrated because when you see that, and as having worked as a prosecutor and worked in sexual assault cases, it's appalling. It's a disgusting behavior. That's not just some kind of allegation. You hear the tape there as well. And so this is something that they should open a broader investigation into, especially with more people coming forward to determine whether or not there can be any further charges made in a case like this.
Based off of that tape, you think you might be able to revisit that?
You could, depending where that happened.
Okay, but what are the statute of limitations in places like New York and Los Angeles? These are very serious allegations.
Right.
You're not talking about women who were able to pass up some of his advances. You're talking about the most serious allegations of sexual assault and rape here.
Right.
So what are the statute of limitations in New York City and Los Angeles?
They'd be able to bring the case depending on where it occurs. So there's separate investigations and finding out what time, how many times it happened. Some of them they might be able to prosecute 1 or 2 instances. They may not be able to prosecute if others are further back. It's very similar in terms of what we saw with Bill Cosby's case, right? So you're going to have to determine that. But this tape in particular, I think is interesting because she's referring to a previous incident the day before where she was actually physically touched. That could be sexual battery, sexual assault.
And he seems to acknowledge that.
Right. And so there's a statement against interest there that would come in that would be admissible. You'd be able to play that tape in court, that whole type of thing, and bring it in front of the judge.
And Kennedy, Hillary waited 5 days to come out and condemn this guy.
Yeah, how
incredibly Why so long?
Because, unfortunately, this is how the system works in politics and in entertainment. And Harvey Weinstein, for years, for decades, had a hold on both. He did something very interesting, and Kimberly, I'm sure you've taken note of this. He hired Lisa Bloom. He said as a tutor, but also here's a woman who normally she handles sort of class action, very high profile sexual abuse, sexual assault cases. As Gloria Allred has done the same thing. Yeah. Harvey Weinstein made sure that he hired her so she would have to recuse herself, so she wouldn't be able to parade a dozen women before cameras. And I think that was very intentional on his part, and it's all part of the cycle of abuse.
She had something in production, I think,
Lisa
as
Bloom
well.
also, yes, he had optioned one of her books, exactly.
Something else that's part of the cycle is abuse, that cycle of abuse that you just pointed out, is something that's happening again. I think in this case, we've seen it in other high-profile cases this year. I want to take care to point it out. We're getting reactions now from Hollywood celebrities, people that have been working with him for decades, some of them. People like George Clooney and Jennifer Lawrence and Angelina Jolie, and the list goes on and on and on. A lot of folks who have spoken out to condemn Harvey Weinstein do so quite eloquently. I'll cite George Clooney, who said, straight up, this is indefensible. The problem with a lot of responses we're seeing, to me, comes from the things they say after they call him out. George Clooney himself did this in his interview. People like him and Jennifer Lawrence say that they have not personally been witness or privy to any of these behaviors from Harvey Weinstein. This is something we see all the time, and I don't know if there's a legal basis for this here, if there's legal reasons, like they're covering their butts, and that's why they include things like this in their statement, but it just rubs me the wrong way that they will take care to say they haven't seen it. When do people rape and sexually assault victims in front of other people? Of course you haven't seen this behavior. Of course Harvey Weinstein didn't ask a young woman to watch him take a shower naked in front of somebody else. Right. This happens in private. Perpetrators go to great lengths to cover up their crimes. It's like if you were talking about a murderer in a court of law, well, I never saw him murder. This is horrible, but I never saw him murder anyone.
That is a good point.
Of course you didn't.
Yeah.
Very good point, Richard.
But he also brought in some executive assistants and things like that. They said to lure people in to make them feel like they weren't alone, and then engage in this behavior, which is just classic sexual predator behavior.
Serial sexual predator, if you look at all the allegations over the course of the time. Richard, people are saying this shows Hollywood hypocrisy, that they champion women's rights, and they've criticized Donald Trump in the past, but have been totally quiet for decades about a guy right under their nose.
Well, I think this is a broader problem that we have in this country around, I hate to use the words, but this ideal of rape culture, right? And I think we commend these women for being brave and speaking out, and I think they're worthy of commending. But I think we have to have a larger conversation, not only about commending these women, but how do we do a better job of educating our men and boys to not make these type of mistakes, right? Like, how do we start having these conversations earlier and earlier and earlier?
How about having accountability within your human resource department?
No, Kennedy, I hear you.
No, but let me finish this point, because this is something that really strikes me about this story. You know who's brave? The intern or the assistant who's working in that office for less than a year. The actress who's never had a role, who comes forward and who knows their story is going to be squashed by a press who is complicit, who has these book deals, who has these movie options, and therefore they're not going to report on the stories. The Matt Damons of the world who squashed the 2004 New York Times story. It's really easy for Gwyneth Paltrow to come forward in 2017, when it's safe to go ahead and tell this, when she has benefited from these relationships for decades. It's another thing. The brave women are the ones whose careers were destroyed, who were sent packing back to the Midwest,
Kennedy,
with their dreams and self-esteem.
I agree with you 100%. What I'm saying is, and we've got to also deal with the supply problem, right? Which is we have men who engage in this behavior over and over again. So how do we stop it before it happens? How do we educate our boys not to make these mistakes, right? How do moms have conversation with their young boys about this is how you treat women? This is how you don't treat women, right? This
is how to treat women. He purposely mistreated women.
I beg to differ.
Well,
is that how you treat women?
George Clooney said we have to do a better job at protecting women in the workplace. And that is true. But what is also true, and what needs to happen first, is, as Richard says, we need to do a better job of teaching young men, boys, how to behave and how not to behave. I think that's the point.
And how to speak
that's,
out as
you know,
well.
He knows the difference between right and wrong, Harvey Weinstein, and he purposely did the wrong thing.
But the
So
I
I don't think we need to blame moms for it.
Well, no, but he's saying to just have education about it, which is important, and to have training about it so people know what is appropriate or not. But this is on a whole other level.
Yeah, this goes beyond
This
like
is
a gray area. This guy is a serial abuser if
absolutely
all the
agree.
allegations
meaning
are
criminality in it. We're not talking
Right.
about
Right,
something being polite manners and how you treat women. We're talking about somebody
Right.
who appears to be a sexually, violent predator.
A criminal.
It's not because of the culture he grew up in, as Lisa Bloom tried to claim in her defense. This is not because he grew up in the 60s and 70s when it was called. It was not appropriate or okay to rape women in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of men and women grew up in the 60s and 70s, and they don't go around treating people like disposable objects.
100%.
Right. So let me get back to the politics of it, because now a lot of people are being asked to return donations. Some donations have been returned, and not all donations have been returned. At what point does all of his money become dirty and you get rid of it immediately, Kimberly?
Well, I know I was reading early in our materials, Jillian, you wrote on an email, we were talking about this. It becomes then difficult to get money back that's been spent. Who do you get it from?
For politicians.
Politicians, when you're saying, he gave money to the Obamas or to the Clintons, if that campaign money's been spent, how are you supposed to claw back something that doesn't exist? Is the candidate supposed to personally pay the money out? And then, everybody is expected to, make a statement. Hillary Clinton, make a statement. This is somebody, and to disavow.
The Obamas have not made a statement to that point you just made.
And Malia, I think it was Malia, interned for his company last year.
Right, and I think Michelle said he was a good guy or a good friend, too. Well, I guess they weren't that close friends because she didn't have any idea. And anybody else said they didn't have any idea either, so we'll see. Coming up, President Trump firing back in his feud with Senator Bob Corker. The latest jab when we return.
You and me, ain't that America?
President Trump and his supporters are taking on the GOP establishment as his feud with Senator Bob Corker reaches a boiling point. President Trump tweeted this about Senator Corker earlier today. The failing at New York Times set little Bob Corker up by recording his conversation, was made to sound a fool, and that's what I am dealing with. Since Congress can't get its act together on health care, I will be using the power of the pen to give great health care to many people fast. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon, speaking with Sean Hannity last night, says in the end, Trump will win.
There's no magic wand we can wave and drain the swamp. There's no magic wand we can wave and blow up this establishment. I hate to tell people you're going to have to work, but you know what? The grit, determination, and courage of the American working men and women, we're going to win. Just voting is not good enough. You have to have a sense of urgency. Nobody's safe. We're coming after all of them, and we're going to win.
Earlier today, Sarah Huckabee Sanders continued support for the president.
I don't think he's alienated anyone. I think that Congress has alienated themselves by not actually getting the job done that the people of this country elected them to do.
Okay, Kennedy, what do you make of this little feud that's now boiling over?
Here's the thing. If you're going to respond to the president and you're going to try and play by his rules, you better be prepared to win. And I don't think Corker was prepared to go the distance. He's like the Conor McGregor.
Right.
You better be prepared to lose. Mayweather may have stumbled a little bit in the early rounds, but it turned out he had more stamina. And I think the president has the upper hand here because Corker's on the ropes. He is a lame duck. And he's unfortunately on the wrong side of the Iran deal. And there are a lot of people who are not necessarily a part of the president's base, because when the president does this, the reaction is, oh, he's just doing this for the base. There are a lot of people in this country who hate Congress, who hate everything they're doing, who are terrified they're going to lose their health care. And they look at senators like Bob Corker and they think you're not making the situation any better by insulting the president. I understand he felt like he had to defend himself, and the adult daycare center a sick burn, but now he's got to move on and show that he has some interest in policy and making this country better.
Yeah, he needed to hire like 5 tweeter-in-chiefs to be helping him out with his material if he's going to go up against President Trump. What do you think of it, Jillian?
I have a take on this. You guys might not agree with me, and it's not fully fleshed out, but just give me your...
With you, Jillian.
Way to be prepared for the show.
I know. I'm always
I'll agree with you, Jillian. It's okay.
Thank you. What if this is what if this whole little feud is a test run for President Trump to see how the Republican establishment, the entire Republican Party, would react to him firing Secretary Tillerson?
Do you care to agree?
Because part of me feels like maybe that's what's happening here. This is a temperature check, because President Trump likes to throw things out there and get, feedback and then make a decision.
It's not impulsive and it's not accidental.
To me, the light bulb went off earlier, and I thought, I wonder if that's what he's doing, because those two are so simpatico, Tillerson and Corker, and in the public domain, they have a very similar image. They're like these elder state.
Our chief interpreter of all things, President Trump, Jesse Waters.
That one out a little bit more, Jillian. I think this is just Trump tweeting and hitting back harder than he got hit. I love the little nickname. I like how he spelled it Liddle. Whatever happened to Little Marco?
But he said that's how he spelled the little before Little Marco.
I thought it was like Lil, like Lil Kim, like Lil Rocket Man. Is this different? Just Little?
Little.
He's changing.
No one
it's
knows.
not L-I-L.
He's changing it up.
He's friends with Senator Rubio
That
now,
is true.
so he's not calling him that.
Sweaty Marco was the second nickname. So I think it's incredibly arrogant for Corker to come out and say that President Trump is a baby and needs adult daycare. What have adults in Washington done? They've given us $20 trillion in debt, wars in the Middle East, a nuclear North Korea, Obamacare, low wages. That little baby, Donald Trump, beat 2 dynasties, Bush and Clinton, and won 3 Democratic states in the election. I think he's just doing fine without adult supervision. Second of all, Corker likes to say the president's unfocused and off message. Trump's been hitting tax return hard. Reform. And Corker's the one who's off message, tweeting at the president. How does that help the people of Tennessee, throwing spitballs at the president? No one likes Washington politicians. This only helps Trump's base when he punches these guys. I don't understand what Corker's objective is. It hurts the party. And to say that this is alienating senators from voting against his legislation, Corker's a true conservative. He's not going to vote against tax reductions because he's a little emotional about a Trump insult. I don't buy it.
But he might vote against where he could have potentially a big impact on hurting the president's agenda is with the nominees to State Department.
If he says he's the kind of guy that's going to put principle above party, then I don't see him doing that. Because if he's a real American, he's going to vote for confirmations.
So here's my problem with this. One, I think the president, just like he owes, well, now Attorney General Sessions, I think he owes Corker quite a bit. Corker was one of the first senators that stuck his neck out there and said to the establishment, hey, I will endorse Trump. I will campaign for Trump. This all started, this whole little beef between, the scuttle between him and Trump. Nobody really knows who started it. It was a off-the-record quote by Corker, some skirmishing between the two. Trump woke up one morning in his usual 6 a.m. Twitter rant, said that he offered Corker, Corker wanted to be Secretary of State. He said, no thanks. Corker's out. He said, Trump said, and he wanted me to endorse him, but Corker said, I didn't want him to endorse him. He actually asked me to run, and I wanted to retire.
He said, he wanted Secretary of State.
Yeah, and I said, no thanks.
I didn't want to come to your stupid party anyway.
Here's what this all boils down to, is this. President Trump needs Republican votes to get things done, including in the United States Senate, right? We saw with health care, he attacked John McCain, and then John McCain went like this. And that was the end of repeal and replace.
Can't do everything via executive order, but it's interesting.
Exactly. And that means he needs Bob Corker, and attacking people who are with you. It's not like Bob Corker's John McCain or Susan Collins. He's actually a lockstep Republican who's voted with this president on 99% of his agenda. So why attack him?
He's not going to switch parties just because he got hit with a Twitter
bomb. But why attack your ally?
He wasn't being an ally. He was saying that he was keeping Tillerson, Mattis, and Kelly was keeping the chaos at bay in the world.
That's because...
And Trump hits back and said, no, I am. And you asked me to endorse you, and then you changed your mind. So
but Corker said that, he was trying to retire, and Trump wanted to run again.
Well, now he's definitely retiring.
No, darling. No, but it's interesting because, a friend of mine noted that there's a lot of hidden courage with Republicans who no longer have anything to lose, and that's when they come out. It's like the Weinstein thing. If you've got something to say, get it out in the open. Don't wait until you're in the safe cover of lame duckdom.
I agree there.
That's true.
Oh my goodness.
Republicans, if you got something to say about Trump, say it now. Say it to his face. We
Well,
want to hear
according
it.
to Corker,
I mean,
and this
Democrats
according to Corker, this is the talk of the GOP Senate. All they can talk about is how Looney Tunes the president is.
They're jealous, aren't they?
Here is
That's
your
why they're not
national
voting on his
stage.
agenda.
It's like
Come speak your
like
mind
Mean
to the
Girls
people.
or something remake. I don't know what's going on there. All right, coming up, it looks like President Trump may have a victory when it comes to the national anthem and the NFL. Want to hear more? Next.
Sam's card is right here. Is this a major Trump victory for the president in his battle with the NFL? NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell sending a letter to team owners saying he expects all players should stand for the national anthem. League owners are expected to meet next week to discuss it further. Now, this comes as the president takes shots at ESPN and controversial host Jemele Hill after it was announced that they would be suspending her for comments she made about the issue. The president tweeted, quote, "With Jemele Hill at the mic, it is no wonder ESPN ratings have tanked. In fact, tanked so badly, it is the talk of the industry." Meanwhile, Reverend Al Sharpton stands firmly with Hill. Watch this.
I think it's outrageous. First of all, Jemele Hill and anyone else has the right to express their views. To try and silence her will not silence many of us. We will not be shut down, and we will not be suspended, and we will not stand for her to be suspended.
Well, Richard, I think that's incredibly paternalistic that Al Sharpton is now speaking for Jemele Hill, who's obviously very capable of speaking for herself.
And she did speak for herself. She did issue some clarifying tweets on the 9th. She said, "Just so we're clear, I'm not advocating an NFL boycott, but an unfair burden has been put on the players in Dallas and in Miami with anthem directives. If fans really are upset with Jerry Johnson, or Jerry Jones, excuse me, and Stephen Robinson, says JJ in this tweet, have done, then don't call the players sellouts. Just stop watching every Sunday." So she clarifies her tweets. So basically, when she made the comment about boycotting, she was saying, if you guys have a problem with the players, then just boycott the game.
Yeah, she's exercising her rights, just
absolutely.
as ESPN is exercising their right, because they have expectations for employees.
Oh, absolutely. And here's my thing. I understand why they suspended her. I just think their social media policy is bad. Period.
Jesse?
Well, before we get to that, I just want to clarify one thing. We said earlier that Angelina Jolie and Gwyneth Paltrow were assaulted. They were actually harassed, they say, by Weinstein. So I think the left lost the culture war, and the NFL and ESPN are collateral damage. Any smart business owner knows being patriotic and doing what your fans want is a good business decision and pro-America. For them to get led astray by the hysterical left-wing media was really dumb, and that's what happened to the NFL and to ESPN. Pence made a strong statement the other day. Less players are now kneeling. Trump won this fight. Now fans say that football is like their third favorite sport. It used to be number one. Ratings are down. Jerry Jones did a whole 180 on this. The other day he was kneeling before the anthem. Now says he doesn't want anyone kneeling. The entire thing has flipped. ESPN anchors are getting triggered and suspended. It's clear where the country stands on this issue, and everybody else is now playing catch-up.
And the game operations manual for the NFL has also been updated mysteriously in the last couple of days to include specific punishments for players who don't stand for the national anthem because it's against guidelines that have been issued years ago. It says now they may be fined, suspended, or forced to forfeit draft choices. This is the teams if the players
That's a big deal.
don't stand for the anthem. And nobody is talking about this because this game operations manual is not publicly available. It's hard to find it, but there's a few outlets now reporting.
Yeah, and there are some subtle
under the
rules
radar
in there that have absolutely been updated. Kimberly, it's no surprise that in places like Dallas, it's a very patriotic part of the country, they don't want to see their players kneeling. You know, they take the flag very seriously. They take the Texas flag very seriously, and they want to make sure that it is honored and inclusive. Why did it take the NFL so long to make this statement? And Roger Goodell said, this is, you know, the sport is supposed supposed to be a unifying sport. It's supposed to bring us together, yet he has allowed this division.
Totally.
So was it the president, or was it fans standing up and not going to games and not tuning in?
Maybe it was a combination of all of it, and the dialogue in the public space, and just seeing the outrage, seeing the channel changing, seeing the ratings going down and the revenues. I mean, look, the bottom line is those stadiums, that's a business. That's where they go to perform their work. We're not doing kneeling and protests here in the middle of the show. We're under contract.
During commercial breaks, we do.
We do, but thank God the viewers don't have to see it. It's
Come on, don't out Richard like that, please.
But what I see here is there's real failure of leadership that it went this far, Kennedy, from, I think, the NFL, and I think from Roger Goodell. He should have handled this right away from the beginning before this just metastasized and spiraled, and putting players in a position that want to show their support for what they think are, signs and oppression that's gone on and the shootings and whatnot. Okay, that's their right to do so, but then they also have to play the game, and the fans want to see them stand for the anthem, and now there's rules and regulations in place, but it's a little late. I mean, it came, that's good, but he had an opportunity to set it right to begin with. That's why he's supposed to be commissioner.
Yep.
So things don't spiral out.
And there were so many clumsy reactions with players, staying in the hallway, and, some kneeling before the anthem, and some just sitting on the bench, and it became very confusing what the ultimate goal and the ultimate message
televise
were.
it.
And and that's also, people want to see the national anthem before a football game.
Something great that happened today is Colts players and yesterday traveled across the city of Indianapolis and met with local law enforcement officials to talk about community issues, goals for the future, to talk about the issues that players have been protesting on the field, and I thought to me, what a wonderful thing to come out of all of this, because if they hadn't protested in the beginning, they probably wouldn't have gotten these meetings with law enforcement. If other teams replicate this across the United States, that is a great constructive way.
But I think that's the point, though. But that's the whole ideal.
The vice president was there.
I mean, I think that's the whole ideal behind these protests. These protests were never about the anthem. They weren't about the vets. They weren't about the troops. They were about protesting racial injustice.
It sure was confusing, Richard.
No, it was never confusing. The fact that the president...
Everyone was confused.
No, it was not confusing. The president tried to make it about the anthem and tried to make it about the troops, and that's what it was never about. It was never about that, Jesse. It was never about that.
Surrounding this issue, we could talk about it for hours, but we're not gonna. We're gonna move on, because coming up, a major development in the Vegas massacre, what we are learning now about the timeline of events, it's raising more questions than before. That's coming up next. Stay right here.
Major new developments in the timeline of the Las Vegas shooting. Police are now saying the gunman shot the hotel security guard 6 minutes before the massacre, not after the shooting was underway as previously reported. Our own Dan Springer's on the ground in Las Vegas with the latest. Dan?
Yeah, and Richard, that's a big deal, because it certainly goes to how the police responded, how quickly they responded. That's all anyone wants to talk about today, is the shift in this investigation in looking at this timeline. Instead of the shooting beginning at 10:05, it actually began at 9:59. And the very first shots that were fired were not down on the crowd here in Las Vegas, but through a door into a hallway at a security guard who works for Mandalay Bay, who happened to be on that 32nd floor because there was a door alarm, an open door alarm that he was responding to. So he was the first person shot at 9:59. At 10:06, the firing began on the people down here, and that, of course, lasted for 11 minutes. So the question is, how quickly did Mandalay Bay respond to the shots fired in their hotel room at one of their employees? That's something investigators will have to be looking at, as well as how quickly the police responded to this incident. Richard?
Thanks, Dan. So, Kimberly, 6 minutes that we have to now figure out what happens. I mean, how do prosecutors, how do investigators figure this out?
This is a pretty significant disruption in the story of what they had told in the timeline. And so much of this is, critical in terms of the minutes that transpired, what kind of response they gave, whether or not they should have been alerted to shots fired up on that floor. Did somebody call it in? So you'd have to get all the call logs, see if anybody called down to say, okay, we heard a shot fired. What was then the response time going up. Obviously, the security guard, Mr. Campos, threw him off because he wasn't expecting that. He was trying to start shooting, so that delayed him, and then he was trying to secure, that room, and then he knew at that point that there was, I think, no chance to escape because that they would be coming in, and he had anticipated if people were going to come in, he was going to be able to see them with those cameras that he set up. But I think that's important because you look at the other piece of evidence that he had all those explosives in his car if he was going to try and then escape, have a route to escape, and then drive that car into another location to explode it or detonate. It's very interesting, and you're just wondering whether or not there's any other materials in his house where he had anything written down, because it seems he went through great lengths, okay, not just a gun enthusiast or somebody that liked to go do target shooting, but who really is this guy? What is his real background and his identity? And I really would start and look at source of funds and the financial trail to try to figure out where was he sending money, where was he receiving money, to find out kind of the story behind this. You hear the girlfriend saying, well, he was making noises in the night, he seemed to be deteriorating mentally. Was he, or was she just saying that?
I mean, Kennedy, she brings up a good point. The fact that, he shot the security guard now first, it sort of changes his whole plan, right, of him trying to escape, go to another site, all of those pieces.
Yeah, because then he started shooting almost immediately. The security guard was shot at 9:59. The shooter was active from 10:05 to 10:15. And where was the police if they know a security guard was shot and you've got an active shooter? You would think it would be less than 2 hours from the time he shoots the security guard until the shooter is pronounced dead. That was 2 hours. That was 9:59 to 11:58. Something happened here that they're not telling us about. And if there's a major element of this story that we're not aware of, that we're being shielded from, maybe you should let people know, and that would open up a whole new stream of tips. Because obviously this shift in the timeline, this is pretty significant, because was he planning on shooting at the moment he started? Because it seems like he was jarred into action with the camera either exposing the security guard outside or being confronted by him.
Because in a criminal investigation, Kimberly, isn't 6 minutes like eternity? Like it might as well be a week, isn't it?
Well,
so
no, it is.
Like
it is a long time. That's what
second,
Kennedy's
right?
saying too. Because when you look at kind of rapid response for something like that, and to be able to go, was the security guard call it in? The shots fired. Were they able to hear it? How quickly they get up, and why then did it take the guy 2 hours before he?
I think from a legal perspective quickly too, this is important because this puts the hotel's culpability like front and center in all of this.
Yeah, I'm beginning to lose a little confidence in the investigation after all this. Also, they changed something. They said he checked in on the 28th. Apparently, he checked in on the 25th. That's changed, so I don't know what to make of this.
How could you not know that?
I know,
why were we given that information?
I don't know. Someone's either covering up something or it's sloppy. We don't know.
Somebody's covering up or it's sloppy. Coming up, the North Korean threat and Jimmy Carter to the rescue. That story's up next on The Five.
Miracle here. Huh?
That girl is easy. The sun came out today. Good morning.
The conflict between President Trump and Kim Jong-un continues, but could it all be resolved thanks to former President Jimmy Carter? There are new reports out today that Carter would like to broker peace between the United States and the North Korean dictator. It wouldn't be the first time that a current president has relied on a former president to manage a very high-profile, highly sort of tenuous diplomatic negotiation, but former President Jimmy Carter is 93 years old. Is this prohibitive to him taking something like this on? What do you think, Kimberly?
Well,
don't we
his
have
heart's in the right place?
But his mind isn't.
I just think that perhaps that's not, drafting our best players at this point to go in a nice way, in a very nice way. He's done incredible humanitarian work, but I wouldn't pick him as my person to go in there and broker.
Like head to head with the dictator.
Yeah, I know.
It's sort of like
you would want to hug him.
It's sort of like choosing Mario Batali to enter a bikini contest. He's got a certain skill set that may not be best deployed here. We have other living former presidents, so maybe we could tap their expertise.
That's not a bad idea. Jesse, who would you tap if you were President Trump?
Not
and
Rodman.
you were going to tap someone.
Not
Yes,
Dennis
well,
Rodman.
We can all agree that Jimmy Carter is a step up from Dennis Rodman.
Well, I wouldn't tap anybody. I think sending over a former U.S. president gives Little Rocket Man credibility. It strengthens his position domestically, internationally, and you're rewarding bad behavior with a visit from a very credible person. Don't do it. This guy, Carter, last time he negotiated the deal in '94, they promised to freeze their nuke program, and we gave them tons of money, reactors, and fuel. That didn't work. I don't see why we have to make the same mistake twice.
Is that Little Rocket Man Liddle or LIL apostrophe?
You have to check Trump's Twitter account.
We're not sure which one. Richard, what do you say?
So I have been a big advocate for us talking to the North Koreans, and the reason being, and I've said this on this show before, is because there's no walking back from what Kim Jong-un could do. If he hits South Korea, Japan, or Guam, we're in World War III, game over. So, and maybe Jimmy Carter's the right one to do it, and here's why: because all the other former presidents had some sort of bad situation with the North Korean government. If Barack Obama ignored
So
them,
did Carter.
He's a terrible choice.
but.
Carter actually teed up the whole thing so Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama could knock it out of the park. Thanks, Jim.
No,
I appreciate that the former president is responding well to his therapy for cancer, and he's doing quite well. Having said that, he should continue running.
No, I hear what you're saying, but
having a positive influence domestically.
News broke today that President Trump is debating the idea of going to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, which I think is to put more pressure on the regime. I think sending a former president over, whether it's Carter, whether it's Obama, whether it's Bush, I think but what I think it says is listen, we understand that you were a child that was not loved by your father, Kim Jong-un, that is, but we also understand that the damage you're able to do is so irreversible and so harmful that we've got to find a way to cool down.
Send Presidents Clinton and Bush the younger.
That's fine.
It's got to be someone, guys. It's got to be someone that 100% has the trust of President Trump, someone who's in lockstep coordination with him every step of the way, no matter who it is.
And Dennis Rodman.
Okay, everyone, stick with us because the best part of the show is coming up next. One more thing.
Time now for one more thing. Many of you guys may remember the Marine veteran Taylor Winston, who commandeered that truck during the Vegas shooting and ended up rescuing a lot of people's lives. So here he was a little while back on Fox News.
Opened the door and the keys were there, and looked at Jen and said, let's go get some people. Each trip was 10 to 15 people, as many as we could cram in there.
All right, so he stole a truck to save lives. Now he's getting a free truck. He's a new owner of a 2013 Ford F-150. B5 Motors in Gilbert, Arizona, gifted Taylor with the truck, and he's going to accept the gift.
In the words of Oprah Winfrey, you get a car!
Everybody gets a car. Everybody else gets something else today, right, Kimberly?
That's correct. You can't drive it, but you can eat it. Time for Kimberly's food. Drive on over to the food court. All right, Jesse, you're already feasting. I like the way you roll. So take a look at this surveillance camera footage. It's very cute. They're capturing 3 hungry little bears. So far, it looks like me, Jesse, and Richard. Jillian, pick it up. A mother bear and her 2 cubs entered Antonio's Real New York Pizza in Estes Park, Colorado, after hours this past Sunday and went on a pizza-eating spree. I'm familiar with this. Gobbling up the dough, yum, 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 in the fridge before moving on to the salami. Yes, so the pizza place posted the video footage on its Facebook page with the note that this could have been so much worse. The business says the bears caused some damage, including ripping out a window of the wall at the drive-thru. They were hungry. They went bear crazy on it, as well as food loss and interior destruction. So in honor of the 3 hungry bears, we shall feast on the pizza. And this is actual salami on here. The other half is pepperoni.
Salami slice is very good. It's good, by the way. Jillian.
Not sweet Kennedy.
I was just about to have a bite.
Free next time.
All right. Well, in the wake of natural disasters like the horrible ones we've seen across the U.S. in recent weeks, animals, domestic animals, pets always fare have an unfair burden to carry. But fortunately, we're commending today organizations like the Humane Society of America. They're on the ground trying to take care to make sure that animals who were rescued don't perish unnecessarily. This morning, this is a shipment of 87 dogs and cats that are coming in from Puerto Rico to Raleigh, North Carolina. They're going to be distributed across shelters in Wake County. So go visit the shelters. If you have room in your home for a pet, now is a great time to take one on. Hundreds of thousands of them, literally across the United States, are now with homes in the wake of these natural.
All right, to another animal lover, Richard.
So Greg Harris will say this, #Joy Rising. A Utah girl became overjoyed when she learned that she was going to be adopted, and the video is amazing. The heartwarming one was caught on video. The 11-year-old Tannen Butterfield spent the last 2 years hoping a judge would make her foster parents her forever parents. Her dream came true when the office manager at her school told her the good news. The office manager posted the video so that the world could share in Tannen's joy. And there we are. We are sharing in it. It's amazing. And so now, not only did this family adopt her, but they also adopted her 2 younger siblings.
Beautiful.
Oh my God.
Great
God
video.
bless.
So, Kennedy.
Beautiful story. My thoughts and prayers go